What's up? Welcome back to my channel, or for the first time if you're new, I'm Sylvan, and today I'm going to be reacting to Tsukishiro Yanagi's character teaser, Oni Guardian. I'm really interested to see what this is about, as between the name Oni Guardian and the thumbnail here, it looks like it might be pretty interesting. So, I'm eager to get into this. I won't belabor things too much. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, leave a comment on your thoughts, and let's get into it. A burning forest? Interesting traditional Japanese music, at least stylistically.
Their village is close now. We'll launch the final attack at dawn.
That's a
Is there no
vaguely
other way?
Soldier
I
11
have to hurry.
outfit.
Huh?
Oh.
Hungry.
Child Sokaku?
You can't eat that. Wait, let me see what I have. Get down!
Oh shit. We're getting some backstory here. Where are we?
Avenge our fallen kin.
She's a valuable hostage. We need her alive.
Did they let
are
any
these
of our people live?
Oh.
They almost killed Sokaku just mere moments ago.
It's because of people like you.
What did you say?
It's because of people like you on both sides that the war keeps repeating over and
What is
over
this
like a
war?
curse we can't escape.
Be silent, human.
Are you saying this is his fault? His father, his brothers, all killed in this war. Not even his baby sister survived. Tell me, who's to blame for all of this?
You and I, we're both to blame. We should have been the ones to stop this.
Sokaku, come here now.
Sis! This lady gave Shokaku tasty food! Shokaku wants to share with everyone!
Do you like it? It's a little hard. Make sure you chew it so you don't choke.
No, humans cannot be trusted.
All of you, stand down.
But
Leave us!
I don't know what to think about this.
You came here alone. What is your real intention?
If my intel is correct,
This feels like an entirely
the
different
one
story.
responsible for starting this war is no longer alive. There's no reason for us to keep fighting.
That's right. My father is dead. Now, I must carry this burden. I just want to protect my people.
I knew you were the only hope to bring peace.
But after everything that's happened, how can we forgive each other?
The only way is to create an opportunity ourselves.
Ooh, I love that shot.
Can
Will
I
you
trust you?
The layering of the lines.
I entrust my life to you. Because I trust you'll make the right choice.
What?
Human and Oni blood now flow together in your veins
Oh, she has
on.
Oni blood?
and finish what I never could. Don't let our blood be spilled in vain.
What?
The rebel Oni leader has been executed. Tsukishiro, you've done us a great service.
All they wanted was to become citizens of New Eridu. I'll take good care of them.
Oh.
Sokaku.
Smells like sister.
Holy shit. What the fuck? What the fuck is this? To everyone who thought that Yanagi was not an interesting character, I have something for you guys! Oh. Okay, composing myself. This is insane. For almost all of this, I was struggling to comprehend how this fits into the lore of where it could happen, when it could happen. Because this is a place with trees and snow that is using predominantly wood, which is very interesting because we've not seen anything like this in the game so far, even implied to exist. Admittedly, we don't know if there's anything really that could exist like this beyond the Outer Ring, like Wastelands, but at the very least from what I thought of things, I thought that pretty much everywhere else was just overtaken by hollows. But maybe there are places outside of New Eridu and the Outer Ring that actually have life and villages and peoples. Maybe the rest of the world is still populated to some degree, and it's just that New Eridu, or at the very least New Eridu is the only one we've been shown to be the case, can actually protect against the hollows where everywhere else just sort of has to survive around them. I could see that, because we know based on the fact that New Eridu is referenced, and also just from general timeline stuff, that this wouldn't have been before the fall of Old Eridu, presumably. Because I don't think New Eridu existed at that point, prior to the fall of Old Eridu. Which means this is definitely not recent, as Sokaku is a literal child here, where at the very least she's a teenager in modern day, but I could see this being roughly a decade in the past, which just leads to some very interesting things, because this opens up the setting drastically. If there are civilizations and peoples and species that exist beyond the Outer Ring, or in parts of the Outer Ring we haven't seen, in environments unlike what we've seen, that means there's a lot that could be explored in the game going forward. It's not just the city and the Outer Ring. That's exciting. And the other thing that is very interesting about this is, obviously from Sokaku, we know that this is several years in the past. At the very least, I'd say 5 years, probably more realistically about 10, because I would assess that Sokaku is probably like 5 or 6 here, 10 at the oldest. And I would estimate that her age in modern day is probably like mid-teens. So probably somewhere between 5 and 10 years in the past is when this happens. And Yanagi is already working with the government in whatever form she is here. She may not be part of what will eventually be Section 6 yet, but at the very least she's working within the government, probably within hand to some degree. But it's interesting to see that even at this point, she already is working within the government, whether it's with hand already or not. It's sort of unclear, but regardless, she's clearly working with the government in some fashion, as she is seemingly representing New Eridu to some degree here. But to get to the actual content of this, we have this opening shot of a burning forest, with no clear sign of what caused the fire or anything else. We can hear the sound of the burning forest, but not really anything else over the sound of the flute that is being played, as we pan down to just very rickety bits of defenses, wooden barriers put up, just very flimsy or fallen apart, signifying that there is someone living in this area, or at the very least this is potentially a battlefield. Either this is a abandoned or ransacked or destroyed settlement of some kind, or this is a battlefield with defenses put up. That is what this immediately implies to me. And then we see a single set of footsteps moving through the snow, as we have over a walkie-talkie, comms, whatever, someone saying their village is close now. We'll launch the final attack at dawn, at which point we see younger Yanagi. She still can be identified as herself based on her hairstyle, but she is in very different clothing, and as I mentioned in the beginning of the reaction, it is very reminiscent of Soldier 11's gear, with the visor and stuff. It's not identical, so I don't necessarily know if it's meant to be the same organization or division necessarily, but at the very least it is very reminiscent of that. And I would not be surprised if it is the same organization. At which point we get our first inklings of what Yanagi's intents here are, without knowing any other details, as she simply turns off her radio, says, "Is there no other way? I have to worry," and then gets distracted and goes, "Huh?" Which immediately shows that she's here on a mission. She has a job to do, but she doubts the methods that she is being told to go about it with, and is questioning if there is perhaps a better way. But regardless of that, she needs to hurry, but she is then delayed, as she finds herself incapable of ignoring this young child in what I'm going to guess now is a battlefield, sniffing at a gun just propped up somewhere. It doesn't seem like it would be Yanagi's gun, because we haven't ever seen her use a gun, and also this seems more like a generic gun, and it was already there when she's moving through, so I don't think it would make sense to be hers. Another sign that this is a battlefield. And they just sort of pause here, looking at each other for a moment. Sokaku, being just a child, pokes out, curious and maybe a bit cautious, but clearly has still some of that childlike curiosity and lack of sense of danger. Because realistically, as we see with the other Oni, in this kind of context, Sokaku should be turning and running, because this is a human soldier in a battlefield between humans and Oni, or at the very least on the edge of the battlefield. It seems like potentially what the fire in the forest is the main battle, and this is essentially Yanagi's mission solo, going away from that to try to basically make contact with the Oni leader. And if I were to guess based on what happens later, the official job she had, her official mission, is to kill the leader, basically cutting off the head of the Oni organization so that this war can end. But then obviously Yanagi does something slightly different. But either way, we have Sokaku here, who's just looking at this woman in this field, clearly very hungry, and isn't sure what to think of her, as she just sort of calls out to an adult and says that she's hungry. Sokaku does not have, at this age, any comprehension of the context of this war, or even any of the details of it. She just sees an adult, someone who might be able to feed her, and she lets that person know that she's hungry, hoping that maybe she can get some food out of it. At which point, Yanagi tries to shush her because they're in the middle of a battlefield and she's on like a stealth mission essentially. But then we hear a bomb in the distance, setting up what's about to happen, as Sokaku ducks down, presumably to try to eat something, as Yanagi says, you can't eat that. And it's here that we begin to see that though in some form of the military or whatever, and on essentially an execution or slash assassination mission, Yanagi is not the kind of person to just disregard a child or just kill someone outright. She is a deeply caring person, as was established in her demo. And she says, wait, let me see what I have. I might have something to feed you. And we learn later that she does. It seems like just some field rations or something. But to continue what I was just saying, this very much shows that her compassion that we saw in her demo is not just towards the people closest to her, not just her immediate coworkers and friends. She is just an innately caring person. Wandering out of a battlefield on a mission to kill someone, presumably, that's where I'm going with this at least, she stops to try to feed a hungry child. That is a sign of someone who is a caring person. The reasons why she's in the military in the first place, and in a position to have taken this mission in the first place, that is harder to say. Because I think it can be generally accepted that purely altruistic and kind people rarely are finding themselves in positions where they are being sent on missions to kill people. But I don't think I have enough information about Yanagi's past or her as a character to really make any claims one way or another about the nature of that. So I'll just leave it there as just a thought. As she's trying to find something that she can feed this child with, she notices the sound of something, another bomb about to land nearby, and we just have this sudden change as the sky dims, flashes white just to the silhouettes of the tree stumps, darkness, another flash of the stumps, as she shouts, "Get down!" A few more flashes, it's all white, the sound of an explosion goes off, and then the flute comes back. As we get this shot of clearly the bomb landed really close to them. And probably more on instinct than anything, Yanagi presumably dove and tried to protect Sokaku. This child from the enemy side of a war that she's a part of, her first instinct was to protect from a bomb, presumably based on technology differences I'm seeing here, a new Eridu bomb. Why that bomb landed in this field that is seemingly not part of the main battle, who's to say? But it happened, and clearly Sokaku and Yanagi almost got killed by it. Luckily, due to her quick thinking and action, they survive, but clearly she gets knocked out. Seems like Sokaku is largely fine, but she is like huddled there, so we don't know if she got knocked out as well. And we have the sound of footsteps approaching. We see a few figures step into view slightly. Based on their footwear, it's implied to be that these are probably of the same culture as Sokaku, being the Oni. As we fade to black, and we hear a cough, and a different voice, separate from the cough, saying, "Kill her, avenge our fallen kin." And it's with these lines, clearly Yanagi's coming back into consciousness as we have this as a perspective shot, and a weak sort of shaky voice responds, the coughing having now subsided, lining up to be the person who is coughing. "She's a valuable hostage, we need her alive." Clearly, Yanagi has been taken in by the enemy, quote unquote. And in retort, the same man who was speaking before says, "Did they let any of our people live?" With just clear hatred and vitriol in his voice, Clearly, the Oni have plenty of reasons to not like humans, or at the very least New Eridu. And in reference to the bomb that fell, the man continues by saying they almost killed Sokaku just mere moments ago. And I believe this is the first name drop of Sokaku, so this would also be the first time Yanagi's hearing the name. And just barely conscious, hunched down on her knees, holding herself up by her bound hands, Yanagi speaks up and says it's because of people like you, which at first sounds very accusatory, and not like the kind of thing that would be a good way to open a negotiation. And of course, in response to a statement like that, this presumably leader says, "What did you say?" And before we get too much further into this, I'd like to just acknowledge some things I like about the way the Oni are shown here. I like the distinctness between a lot of them. This leader has red skin and a single horn in the middle of their head, but has the same distinctive pointed ears, and of course just has vibrantly colored skin. So that seems to be the main telltale things, is at least one horn, pointed ears, and vibrant skin color. Meanwhile, the other has the exact same shade of blue that Sokaku does. There's a better shot of him later, but I'm not sure exactly if he only has one horn, or if he once had two, but the other one might have gotten broken off or something. Either way, though, I like just seeing more Oni. It's interesting to me, given that prior to now, Sokaku was the only one. Answering the question of what did you say, Yanagi clarifies. It's because of people like you on both sides. Now, the interesting thing is, initially here, I don't know if she's just talking about the leader of the Oni, just about the blue-skinned Oni man, both of them, or whatever. I don't know specifically which one she's talking about. I'm inclined to think that she involves the leader in this, but I don't know for sure. What my immediate thought with this statement is the idea that a war only continues because people on both sides refuse to talk to each other, refuse to negotiate, which in this context is much more related to the blue-skinned Oni than it is to the leader, but it could be said that the leader is also continuing this war for no good reason necessarily, and of course in this implication, there are people on the human side as well. And Yanagi disagrees with that. She wants an end to this conflict. And her line continues, extrapolating on it, saying, it's because of people on both sides that the war keeps repeating over and over. This is an endless cycle filled with revenge and hate that will never stop as long as there are people on both sides who are too angry to talk to each other. That is what I gather from this line. And she finishes the line by saying, like a curse we can't escape. And it's here that we get a more clear shot of the blue-skinned Oni. Presumably, they are one of the main warriors of the Oni in this context, but potentially it's just that he is one of the ones who captured Yanagi, so that's why they're here. But I could very much see them being one of the main warriors. A couple things I'd like to touch on with him specifically. One, the fact that he has the same shade of blue as Sokaku, skin color-wise. I feel like it is not a stretch to imagine that this man might be related to Sokaku, potentially a father figure, or an older brother, or even just a distant relative. I don't know exactly how diverse the Oni are in coloration and stuff, but I would not be surprised if in some way this man is related to Sokaku, given that he was the one who most directly expressed concern for her well-being. The second thing I'd like to acknowledge is I really enjoy all of the masks that the Oni seem to wear. It seems like a major cultural thing for them to wear masks. Now, the fact that he's wearing a mask but the leader isn't, and we see a lot of broken masks in a moment here, leads me to an interesting potential cultural thing of perhaps the warriors of the culture wear masks. Perhaps part of the traditional armor and garb of the Oni warriors is to wear a mask, which would be distinctly stylized to each warrior, presumably crafted for them specifically, if not made themselves. Which is just a very simple but naturally intuitive piece of culture that we can just sort of grasp onto here that is cool and distinct, and I like quite a bit. And by extension with that, something that I find really interesting is Sokaku. Prior to now, she was the only character that is an Oni in the game so far as I know. And in her ult, she puts on a mask, which is potentially a really interesting piece of character. It is entirely possible that after all of this, after Sokaku ends up joining Section 6 and stuff, she has incorporated herself into New Eridu society. It's hard to say what exactly the circumstances of all of these Oni refugees are after this war, but clearly Sokaku at the very least has integrated into society, but it seems like she retains at least this one piece of culture, which is when she goes into battle, she dons a mask. that isn't identical to these, because these seem more handcrafted, potentially made out of wood and that kind of thing. Much more traditional craft, where Sokaku's mask seems more technological and potentially actually has some mechanical benefit to her. But just from a cultural standpoint, she is, whenever going into battle, embracing a piece of her culture, even though she may exist in a society that does not represent her culture, and she has very limited ways of doing so, potentially. And I just really like that as just an unsaid character piece. But continuing on, this guy tries to shut up Yanagi, as some other warriors here bring blades close to her, trying to make sure she doesn't move or do anything, as the leader coughs briefly before saying, "Are you saying this is his fault?" Which, between the interaction that just happened and the next line, which I'll get into in a moment, that actually, I think, answers my question of who Yanagi was referring to with her line about people on both sides. I think it was specifically talking about the potential relative of Sokaku, which makes me more confident in the idea that she's referring to people filled with hatred that refuse to let go of that hatred to potentially seek an end to the conflict. People who are just overcome by rage and a wish for revenge, that the fighting will just forever continue and never stop until one side is gone. Or at the very least, that's what the leader gets from Yanagi's statement. It is entirely possible Yanagi meant the leader to still be involved in that, but who's to say? But continuing with that question, truly sort of questioning what Yanagi was saying, questioning why it's a bad thing for him to be angry. She says, his father, his brothers, all killed in this war, which, if I'm right, and this is a relative of Sokaku, that would imply that at the very least, a few direct relatives of Sokaku are dead. If this is her older brother, that means Sokaku's dad is also dead and a lot of her other siblings. If this is her father, that means her grandfather and a lot of uncles are dead. Even if this is a cousin, probably at least one of those is a brother or father or something to Sokaku, which is truly tragic. But to get back to the reason this is being said, the leader is stating that this man has lost his entire family practically in this war. All of them have been killed in this war, safe to assume by humans, by the military of New Eridu, for whatever reason. Does he not have the right to be angry about that? Not even his baby sister survived. Potentially a sister of Sokaku? Regardless of if they're related to Sokaku, the idea that a baby has died because of this war is a complete tragedy. The leader is right to acknowledge this as a reason to be angry, a reason to not trust the humans, to fight against them. She is right that he is deserving of this anger and this belief that revenge is needed. And to finish out the statement, she asks Yanagi, tell me, who's to blame for all of this? Who's to blame for all of the deaths in that man's family? In all of the Oni deaths by the hands of the humans? Who is to blame for that? But she begins coughing up. Clearly, the leader is sick in some way. Clearly, Yanagi thinks about it for a moment. She's looking down, processing the words that the leader is saying, but she does not hesitate in her response. She is quick on her response, and she is resolved in it. You and I, we're both to blame. We should have been the ones to stop this. Which is interesting. The fact that this is said in the past tense is what really intrigues me, because I understand the idea that the Oni leader is to blame for all of these deaths past the initial starting of the war, for not having stopped the war, for having not been willing to approach the negotiation table and attempt to find a way towards peace. Now, of course, that's a two-sided issue, which she's acknowledging, but the fact that Yanagi is the person she says is to blame on her side is interesting. Perhaps she's just saying that to make things more directly personal in this moment, and that she represents the possibility of negotiation with humanity, with New Eridu. Quite possibly she's saying, we should have been the ones to stop this, but that doesn't mean we can't still do it. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the angle she's trying to take, but before she can continue, she gets interrupted, not by the leader, by Sokaku rushing up to her, unafraid, hungry, biting at her leg, looking up at Yanagi, seeing that she's in pain or whatever, and says, can't eat this either? Whether she knew there was some food in that pocket or whatever, who's to say, but it then cuts to the leader and the warrior, and the man says, Sokaku, come over here now. Clearly, even if this man isn't related to her, he is an authority figure that views himself as responsible for her in some regard. And as it fades towards the leader specifically, who is probably still thinking about what Yanagi just said, Sokaku speaks up and goes, sis, this lady gave Sokaku tasty food. Which, I'm assuming the leader is not this sis that is being spoken of, given that in a moment here, another female voice can be heard that I don't think is Yanagi or her, given that she isn't speaking when the line line is said, and I don't think Yanagi is either because I think it cuts to her, but we'll be able to see in a moment here. To stay on focus here, I believe Sukaku is talking to her sister, who is someone off screen that we just haven't seen yet, and as Sukaku says that this lady gave Sukaku some food, something changes in the mind of the leader. She has a shocked, almost in a way, fearful expression. I don't know if that's quite the way to put it, but she's definitely surprised, but she also seems like she might be scared of the fact that a human soldier showed kindness to one of her people's children. Perhaps it is what enables her to believe that Yanagi is someone she can actually negotiate with, rather than someone who can't be trusted. And there's actually this really good moment here where just her eye twitches a little bit. And in the midst of all of this tense negotiation and discussion, Sukaku is sort of this beacon of light, a childlike joy that goes beyond the cycle of pain and hate. The potential that humans and Oni don't need to hate each other and kill each other. This sister says, "Do you like it? It's a little hard. Make sure you chew it so you don't choke." Really not a remarkable line, but just clearly showing the sister trying to be caring for Sukaku. And the man saying, "No, humans cannot be trusted. We can't trust their food." Probably in his mind, he's thinking it's poisoned or something, maybe. But this entire time, the leader doesn't turn to look at this happening. She's looking forward. She's thinking. She's looking down slightly. She's considering what this means, what Yanagi's words were, and the fact that Sukaku seems to innately have no distrust of Yanagi and have been gifted some food by her, what this could mean. In response to the man saying that humans can't be trusted, she says, "All of you stand down." And we can see the wear on her face, almost better here than any other point. We can see the bags under her eyes. Notably, when she says this, she isn't coughing, her voice isn't particularly weak, and for a moment, the man's gonna retort, but she says, "Leave us," very sternly, and then starts coughing up blood. Clearly, her condition is not good. She probably is not long for this world. And Yanagi recognizes this. And whether the soldiers have left yet or not, the blades are drawn away, and the leader begins to speak to Yanagi more straightforwardly, directly asking her, "You came alone. What is your real intention?" At this point, she's willing to communicate, willing to potentially negotiate, but only after she knows why she came alone. Was she here to assassinate her, or to actually negotiate? And in response, once again, without much hesitation, Yanagi says, "If my intel is correct, the one responsible for starting this war is no longer alive." And as she says that, we get this wall of masks. Some of them seem to be a little damaged in places. The masks of fallen warriors, perhaps. And based on that line, it becomes very clear that, just as she says, the person who started the war isn't alive. Whatever the context of this was, the Oni incited it in some way. Whether or not it was justification enough for New Eridu to go to war against the Oni, it is recognized in this moment by both Yanagi and the leader that the former leader is responsible for this war breaking out in some way. Following through with this statement, saying, if this intel is correct, there's no reason for us to keep fighting. And I don't think it's a coincidence that when she says that there's no reason to keep fighting, it fades into Yanagi, away from the broken masks of the dead warriors, into the next generation, who is not tainted by the war yet. The next generation does not need to be tainted by this. As we see Sukaku sleeping, having taken a bite out of the food, smiling. In response to Yanagi's assessment, the leader confirms, "That's right, my father is dead," implying that there likely is a familial succession here. The exact hierarchy is unclear, but regardless, the former leader who started this war is the father of the leader, which in and of itself, based on what she was saying before, gives her, within her own person, a right to be angry and distrustful of humanity. Her own father has been killed in this, or at the very least died during it. And the way she says it, there is an amount of resignation in that. And though she is tired throughout all of this, I feel that the tiredness is continuing to grow the more we see her. As she says very weakly, "Now I must carry this burden," believing that she must continue the war that her father started. And the reason she gives for continuing this war, for continuing to carry this burden, is that she just wants to protect her people. Having become the ruler mid-war, where she looks at her people and the forces they're up against, and she does not trust that they will have a good life, let alone survive, if they surrender. But with her coughing at the end of this statement, it is clear that whether or not she acknowledges it, she does not have much longer in her life to protect her people. She will not be able to protect her people through this entire war unless it is brought to an end. I'm pretty sure at this point all of the warriors are gone as they were told to leave. Yanagi stands up, still bound at the hands, but stands up as she says, "I knew you were the only hope to bring peace." Her hair comes down a little bit in this, and signaling that even if it wasn't the mission Yanagi was sent on, Yanagi wanted to seek peace if possible, and she knew that meeting with the leader was the only way to do that. But in weak retort, the leader says, "But after everything that's happened, how can we forgive each other? We, on both sides, have taken so many lives in the name of this war. How can possibly our two peoples coexist?" And as she always has been in this, Yanagi simply responds, "The only way is to create an opportunity for ourselves. The only way that we can forgive each other is if we allow ourselves to." And in this moment, the two people in this room are the ones with that capability. Yanagi and this leader are the ones who can create that opportunity for peace. Probably won't turn out perfectly for the Oni. They will definitely be the quote-unquote losing side, but it's the only way for it to end without further bloodshed. And it's here that we get my favorite shot from this entire video, as we have the split sides of the shot move into each other until it's one half of each of their face. And we have the layered lines, "Can I trust you?" from the leader, and "Will you trust me?" from Yanagi. It's at this point where, having been opposed for this entire conversation, in this moment, the two of them fall in line enough to each other's thinking and are close enough to be willing to negotiate and trust each other that Yanagi asks if the leader will be willing to trust her in the same moment that the leader asks if it would be okay to trust Yanagi, if that wouldn't be a mistake. And that is easily the best moment of all of this. That moment where these two opposing forces, in this moment representatives of these two warring peoples, finally decide to reconcile. Now what's very interesting about this is with that moment, we know a deal will be made. Peace will be achieved no matter how grim. We get a surprising turn of events, for me at least, with the leader who, at this point, probably acknowledges for themselves that they do not have long to live in the first place, and they are the leader of the enemy force opposing New Eridu. Peace will likely not be accepted by New Eridu's military unless the leader who has propagated this war is dead. Perhaps even some cut conversation happened between these two things where Yanagi explained that she was actually sent here for her head. I could see that. But despite that, in understanding of that, the leader says, "I entrust my life to you," to Yanagi. In a sign of good faith, in a hope for peace, she entrusts her life to what should be one of her sworn enemies. And answering the dual questions of a moment ago, she says, "Because I trust you'll make the right choice." She trusts Yanagi now, with her own life, with her people's lives. She trusts that Yanagi will make the choice that will save her people. And with that, we see a blade come down and a candle go out, and the sound of flesh being severed. Presumably in, as we see here, some kind of ritual execution done by her own people. The leader has sacrificed herself to, well, first off, willingly of her own volition, cut off the head of this upstart rebel force. But at the same time, perhaps in a showing of trust so that the rest of her people will trust Yanagi, it isn't just that she allows herself to be killed, it's that she, as I said, allows herself to be ritually executed. And what this ritual does is seemingly blend human and Oni blood within Yanagi, imbuing Yanagi with the blood of the leading Oni. I don't know if necessarily the culture of Oni has a royal bloodline or something equivalent, but if they do, this is symbolic of having no heirs, allowing themselves to be killed in this ritual, a both metaphorical and literal passing on of the bloodline to someone else, to a human, someone who she views as a symbol of potential peace. As I was saying, human and Oni blood now flow together in Yanagi's veins, as we have this heartbeat sound, and this flowing blood in these little divots moving towards Yanagi, as there's a flash of light in her eyes. And at this point, we have this just bright light out of a doorway, a hand landing on it, and the leader, essentially from beyond the grave now, within Yanagi now, saying, "Live on and finish what I never could. End this war that I was powerless to stop." And it's here where we see Yanagi seems like almost weekly. Perhaps the ritual took quite a bit out of her, supporting herself on the doorway as well as with a naginata, seemingly guiding the Oni out of their homes, out of their cave, into the light of day. The music and overall atmosphere of this is not necessarily hopeful. There is hope, but there is also a deep sadness to it, a deep melancholy. This is not a victory for the Oni. They are not winning here. They are losing, but there is the hope that that loss does not need to mean the end of them. Something else that just crossed my mind here that could be actually a deeply impactful and tragically beautiful thing that's similar to the Sukaku mask detail I was acknowledging earlier is just a minor character detail that probably will never actually be specifically acknowledged, but that at the very least, I'm going to take as headcanon. The fact that prior to now we have not seen Yanagi with any weapons until this moment when she is now essentially taking on this role of this ray of hope for the survival of the Oni, is she now wielding a naginata, one of the two weapons that she uses in game, the other being a katana. Initially, there wasn't anything really to question about that kind of weapon choice, because aesthetically it's just a very expected thing for this kind of game to have katanas and similar weaponry, but it is not lost on me that Yanagi is a character that uses Japanese weaponry, and the earliest point in her storyline, in her backstory, in the timeline that we see her wield one, quote unquote, is once she literally takes on the burden of protecting the Oni and ensuring their survival, that she begins wielding one of their weapons. It makes me think that much like Sukaku wears a mask in battle to be an honoring of her people and her culture, Yanagi chooses to wield a naginata and katana in honor of the people that she has vowed to protect. And if that is the case, I am absolutely in love with that. That is the kind of characterization that makes me fall in love with a character. And the last line, I believe, that we hear from the now dead leader is, "Don't let our blood be spilled in vain." And I feel like that is somewhat of a dual meaning of the overall blood of the Oni, but potentially as well of the humans who have died, but even more so, her blood that she has now given to Yanagi. No longer hers alone. Don't let the blood that flowed through my veins and now flows through yours be spilled in vain. On one front, that is a statement of saying, please in my stead honor the dead and protect the living of my people when I cannot. And on the other front, it could perhaps mean, do not let yourself die in vain. I am putting the hopes of my people in you, so you cannot die in vain. You would not just be spilling your own blood, but mine as well, and therefore the blood of all of my people. I don't know if that's intended, but I like to take it that way. And with that, everything fades out, and we have a deeper voice. Says, the rebel Oni leader has been executed. Tsukishiro, you've done us a great service. Clearly, the exact details of how or why the New Eridu military is not concerned with. They just care that the rebel leader has been executed, the rest of the Oni have surrendered. That can be the end of the war. Good job, Tsukishiro. You have done a great service for your military in being responsible for the death of a leader and the surrender of a people. I very much wonder what Yanagi's opinion of the military is, given all of this. She clearly is still working within the government. I don't know necessarily where things lie with Section 6. Exactly, I know it's part of hand, but I'd be curious to see what her opinions on the military in general is. Perhaps in response, if not directly or just within her own thoughts. We have Yanagi, but we see her bandaged up here. This is clearly not long after the entire endeavor into the Oni territory. As she says, all they wanted was to become citizens of New Eridu. Now, obviously, I don't know the details of this war, why it started in the first place, but based on that line, it makes me think that perhaps, for some reason, the Oni, being native to somewhere outside of New Eridu, but seeking asylum, essentially, from the Hollows, presumably, sought to become citizens of New Eridu, but for whatever reason, were denied. And presumably, that resulted in rising tensions until war broke out. Presumably, the former leader rallied their people to this cause, seeing as unjust that they are not allowed to be let in to the last stable society of the world, as far as we know. And then her next statement, which I feel is almost more a response to the now dead leader than it is to her superior. He says, I'll take good care of them. They wanted to be citizens of New Eridu. The end of this war, though it unfortunately is as refugees, they have been brought into New Eridu. The exact fate of them is unclear, but at the very least, they have amicable enough of a position in society that one of their children could grow up to join the government. But regardless, Yanagi vows to take care of them, to make sure that the vows she made to the now dead leader are kept. And it's here that we hear Sokaku running up and jumping into the arms of Yanagi. To me now, Sokaku symbolizes Yanagi's vow to take care of the Oni. Even if she is not in a position to directly protect all of them, to ensure all of their safety and well-being, she has enabled Sokaku to have a fulfilling life in a position of relative power. Now, of course, you can argue whether or not that is necessarily the best thing, but given the circumstances it seems things are in, it's probably the best Yanagi could do. And it's this that also makes me feel correct in my assessment from the demo, that especially towards Sokaku, Yanagi has a certain aspect of motherliness, of taking care of Sokaku, of being that mother figure or bigger sister figure that Sokaku may not have anymore because of the war. As we have this painfully conflicting line of Sokaku saying, "Smells like sister," when nuzzled up against Yanagi. Sokaku has inevitably lost many people in this war. Despite that, or potentially in some way because of that, she latches onto Yanagi as this position of comfort, of something that reminds her of her sister, of someone who took care of her. I did not expect for Sokaku and Yanagi to have such an intertwined relationship, but it makes me drastically more invested in both of them equally. It's hard to say because I'm just fresh off of watching this, but I think this is my favorite character teaser from Zenless. It is a masterful 4.5 minutes of storytelling that, in tandem with the in-game characters, tells us so much in so little time and portrays a deeply tragic story that prior to now, we had no clue about. How do they do that? How the hell do they do that? But regardless, at this point, I've been talking about this for truly far too long, so I'll end it there. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, leave a comment on your thoughts, and I hope you all enjoyed this video. Goodbye.